Today I'm happy to present our keynote. Christian Gaines, who was born in Brussels, Belgium, to American parents, and they moved to the United Kingdom when he was only 4 years old. Then came to the United States in 1984, attended Vassar College, graduating in 1987 with a BA in English Literature. Since then, Christian has held various director, management, and administrative positions with the Cannes, Hawaii, and Sundance Film Festivals, and was director of the festivals of the American Film Institute. He has also served on numerous festival film jurors, both here in the States and throughout the globe. In 2008, Christian joined the IMDb.com, an Amazon.com company, where he was director of festival strategy and business development, overseeing the global expansion of WithoutAbox.com, a web community and film submission platform connecting filmmakers to film festival worldwide. In April 2013, Christian joined ArtPrize as executive director. ArtPrize is a radically open, independent, organized international art competition, annually attracting over 400,000 attendees and around 1,500 artists in Grand Rapids over 19 days. He also continues to serve on many film and art advisory boards, including the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs. Christian is a movie and music fanatic. He has run 7 marathons and counting, and was the bass player in the LA rock band. He has a regular music show on community radio, WYCE-FM. Christian is married, and his wife is Dr. Christian Taylor, a cognitive psychologist, writer, and development specialist. They have 2 spectacular children, Lola, 21, and Luke, 18, and they recently traded Los Angeles for Grand Rapids and West Michigan to play a part in its growing reputation as a hotbed for art, design, culture, innovation, and urbanism. Christian's topic is how an open art competition transformed a city and changed the way we think about art. So please, let's give Christian a warm Rotary welcome.
All right. Hi, guys. How you all doing? Thank you so much for having me. I love the Rotary Club. I love speaking here. I love being reminded of your 6 areas of focus. It is a real inspiration. One of the things that amazes me about the Rotary Club is there's all different kinds of people, and they're all different ages. So like, it's a dynamic organization that attracts a lot of new people all the time. That is a really, really cool thing. So thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about something that I truly love, which is ArtPrize, and by extension, the city of Grand Rapids. I thought I'd just kind of give an overview of kind of how ArtPrize started, but I thought I would just kind of level set the conversation with just like a quick little sort of sizzle reel video, which is ArtPrize last year, our most recent ArtPrize, which is in September and October of 2016. I thought I'd start there, dive into what ArtPrize is, kind of how it works, a little bit of behind the scenes stuff, and some of the interesting things that we grapple with as we put on this event year after year. Does that sound good? All right. So here's a little video.
Forget the crush, we're leaving. Forget the past that we won't make it on our own. A road less traveled on is where you find what you're looking for. You find what you're looking for.
So that was a little glance back at last year's ArtPrize. That's sort of the atmosphere. That's what we're striving for every single year, and always trying to evolve and always trying to change. But it's probably really helpful to just go back to the beginning. You know, ArtPrize was a complete and total experiment. It was an experiment that was started by someone named Rick DeVos. You might have heard of him. It was something that could have succeeded or it could have failed. And there was really no energy about whether it could have succeeded or it could have failed going into it. They had no plans necessarily to even do the event again if it was a big failure. But they wanted to try something out. Their original idea was to start a film festival, but Rick correctly assumed that as someone who has spent a lifetime in film festivals, you can't throw a rock without hitting a film festival somewhere in the world. And it's really hard, it's a struggle to make something kind of unique. He wanted to do something completely different, something that hadn't been done before. So he came up with this idea of ArtPrize, a challenge, a disruptor to the contemporary art world, which has been, much like the film festival world, a traditional sort of top-down, tightly curated approach to contemporary art. You have experts telling you what is the good art that's out there, and experts comparing or defining what good art is as opposed to what any other kind of art is. And so what if you just blew that open and you created an event where any artist working in any medium from anywhere in the world could apply, where there were no curators, there were venues, and anyone could be a venue. And then those artists and those venues connected and created a show that way, an entirely unpredictable show. So that was the original idea. Started in 2009. They announced the idea in April of 2009. The first event was in September of 2009. They didn't know what to expect. They were hoping for maybe a few hundred artists and a few dozen venues. In the first year, they got 150 venues and 1,500 artists. Over 200,000 people came downtown, and many of you might remember, they just ran out of food. They just had to, everyone just was like, okay, that's it, we have to go home because we just picked over downtown completely. So they realized that they had something there. And then at the end of the first year, they were like, well, I guess we better tell everybody that we're gonna do this again. And it wasn't until the end of 2010, December 31st, 2010, that ArtPrize actually became its own 501c3 nonprofit organization. And it's been operating ever since then as a 501c3 nonprofit, and everything that kind of goes along with that. So this is the idea. What happens when you combine an open art competition? You make it completely open. Anyone working in any medium can be an artist. Anyone can be a venue. And you announce this spectacular cash prize, by far and away the largest cash prize that had ever been announced anywhere in the contemporary art world by a large factor. And this idea of a spectacular cash prize was really intended to engage and involve the visitor more than it was actually intended to engage and involve the artist. This is a way for visitors to kind of get involved and opt into the experience and validate their feelings, their impressions about work by validating an artist with a thumbs up, with a vote. And so that's kind of how it started. There was this original sort of technology that we've iterated upon and made kind of more stable then, and created new features and functionalities as we've gone. But it's still essentially the same thing. Visitors can opt in, they can register, and they can vote on all of the art that appears at ArtPrize. This is a radically open and very, very different concept that amazes and delights some people and confounds and infuriates others. So this is our mission statement now. We're an international art competition and festival. We're open to all, and we're determined equally by both public vote and expert jury. More about that in a moment. We encourage critical discourse, we celebrate artists, we transform urban space, and we promote cultural understanding. Just like the Rotary Club, we have our own set of what we call guiding principles. We talked about being radically open. This idea of celebrating artists is really incredibly important to us. More about that in a minute. This idea of being a catalyst, being an organization that can create catalytic activity outside of the activity that we ourselves generate. This idea that we want to fill every available space with art. This idea that we want to challenge everybody. We want people to step outside of their comfort zones, to gravitate towards the unfamiliar, to walk off the beaten path is something that's really, really important to us. Generating conversation is very, very important to us. This idea of being intentionally and authentically inclusive is very important to us. ArtPrize is not just for anyone, that's an idle invitation. It has to be for everyone, and that means you have to create programs where everyone belongs. This idea of promoting the social good, talk a bit more about that in a moment. In addition to putting on a big art competition and a big visitor event, we think a lot about health and wellness. We think a lot about artist development, about education, about environmental sustainability, about diversity and inclusion. These are all things that we feel as an organization that attracts over 500,000 people, we need to step squarely into the middle of some of these very, very big issues. This idea of embracing technology. So often technology is an afterthought to companies. You're a company and you go, oh my God, I need an app, because everyone has an app. Or you essentially put your printed brochure on a website. Technology is baked into the ArtPrize experience. We cannot put on ArtPrize without technology. We depend on technology to connect our visitors and our artists, and we depend on technology for visitors to be able to vote. And last but not least, we are an evolving experiment. Any artist working in any medium can participate in ArtPrize, and the event is entirely free, always has been and always will be, to the general public. We love this idea of hundreds of possible venues. There are venues that are traditional venues that you would expect, like art museums and galleries, like the Grand Rapids Art Museum or the Urban Institute for Contemporary Arts. But there's also more unorthodox venues, parks and bridges and rivers, but there's also vacant storefronts and empty office spaces, and coffee shops and bars and restaurants and hotel lobbies and laundromats and auto body shops and the Grand Rapids Police Department. The airport is a venue this year, and so on and so on. This idea of having every venue kind of opt in and be a part of it, and making ArtPrize as much about discovering and rediscovering a city as it is about discovering art is something that's really important to us. This idea of artists and venues connecting is very important to us. This is a decentralized model that people have a really hard time getting their heads around because they're so used to this idea of curators, of experts picking things, and this idea that anyone can opt in as a venue and then have a choice of being able to kind of look at a bunch of different work and choose and decide how they're going to create their own shows. And last but not least, a total of $500,000 is awarded both by public vote and by expert jury. So this is an interesting aspect, and this is a fairly recent in the last 3 years to ArtPrize, which is half of the prize money, $250,000, is awarded by smartphone-enabled public vote, and the other half is awarded by a jury of art experts. They are critics and artists and curators and museum directors and so on. And in this way, you can compare and contrast what the experts think to what the public thinks. And that creates a tension around which a million different conversations happen around what art is and why it matters to you kind of personally. And this is kind of intentional. It manufactures this environment where these conversations take place. And sometimes those conversations are surprising and delightful and wonderful and pleasant. And sometimes they're askance and confused and infuriated. And that's the way we like it. A lot of people don't know, like one of the common things that you'll get, questions that you'll get at ArtPrize is like, so what do you do the rest of the year? And ArtPrize is actually a year-round process. Towards the beginning of the year, venues register. They register at artprize.org and they spin up a profile. Not long after that, artists do the same thing. They spin up a profile at artprize.org. And then, much like a dating site, artists and venues connect. They look at profiles. The artist will look at a venue profile, the venue will look at an artist profile, and they'll send each other messages, and independent exhibitions will sprout that way. During the event itself, it's a 19-day event. There will be 2 rounds of voting. The first round, everyone votes on everything or anything that they like within the competition itself. And that's really a time when everyone's just really voting on everything that they like. This will bubble up on the public side, 20 finalists, and then everyone really votes on what they would like to win. At the same time, the expert jury is showing up in town and doing the same thing. $500,000 in prize money is also awarded towards the end. And this is kind of how it breaks down. 2 $200,000 cash prizes, and then 4 12,500 categories. 2-dimensional, anything that you might look at on a wall. 3-dimensional, a sculpture that you might walk around. Installation, which is something that's site-specific. It's something that's informed by its surroundings. If it were to change where it is, it would materially change what the artist had intended about the work. And then time-based, which includes things that you would expect, like perhaps video installation, but it also includes music and dance and musical theater and film and lots of other things, things that essentially have a start time. So since then, so as we've been doing this, we've been doing it for 9 years now. Lots of people have been saying a lot of nice things about us. Chicago Tribune did a great travel article about us last year. Rachel Maddow and her show on MSNBC talked about us for 7 minutes at the beginning of her show, which was really incredible. We get a lot of local and regional and national and international news. And what's happened is in just 9 years, ArtPrize has become the most attended public art event on the planet. Thank you. There are biennales and exhibitions all over the world in places like London and Seoul and St. Petersburg and Tokyo and so on. And the art newspaper, which is sort of an industry trade, if you were a auctioneer at Sotheby's or Christie's, or if you were a museum director, you would read the art newspaper every week. They do an annual big ticket list, and 2 years in a row now, we're at the top of the list. So, thank you. So a few really quick things as we go. How am I doing on time?
Got a minute?
Got one minute.
You got a minute and then time for...
Okay. Real quick, just some kind of fun stats about the event itself. I'm going to just keep on going through some of these real quick. We rely heavily on private sector corporate sponsorship these days, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute in a kind of behind the scenes kind of a thing. We do kind of hopefully what we think are whimsical and customized activations with various corporate sponsors. This is how our visitors have gone over the years, from about 10,000 a day to over 27,000 a day. This is our economic impact since 2011, from about $15 million to about $29 million in 19 days of net new economic activity in the city of Grand Rapids. Pedestrian traffic triples. We do 4 shows in prime time on the local NBC affiliate, Wood TV, which is this is the 39th largest media market in the country out of about 210. So we're not 1 or 2, but we're not 100 or 150 either. And we have to, we take over an hour of prime time 4 nights during the event, so we preempt Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, and we win the ratings for the night. A little bit about our demographics. This is interesting. We're about a $3.5 million a year organization. And 57% of our funding now comes from private sector corporate sponsorship. About 23% comes from grants and foundations. The original family foundation that funded us, the Dick and Betsy DeVos Family Foundation, now accounts for 7% of our annual revenue. By next year, it will be 5%, and the year after that, it will be nothing, unless we ask for more, which we might. And then we have lots of transactional income through things like merchandise, and we have 2 membership societies. I talked a lot about kind of our social good and our social responsibility. I'm going to blaze through all of these. These are just really nice pictures, but I've talked a lot about these things. So this idea of just making art impossible to ignore is something that's really fun about ArtPrize. This idea about transforming urban space, about debating. This is the television show that I was telling you about. This idea about kind of challenging everybody. What the heck are those things? Over there. Embracing technology. And then this is an interesting thing, minting the next generation of artist and art lover. Having people have an authentic experience, and last but not least, experimenting and evolving as we go. When you have a platform that relies on unpredictability, you have to embrace the idea that amazing things will happen on that platform, but people might also be disappointed as well. So how do you balance an unpredictable platform with a visitor experience where people can guarantee that they're going to show up? And this is something that we're sort of kind of working on. There's sort of an interesting juxtaposition of like the juried winner versus the public vote winner per year. This was Northwood Awakening and Higher Ground, Kate Gilmore's Higher Ground. This is the piece, of course, that won both the public award and the juried award 2014. Just some real quick themes. When ArtPrize began, some on the original team with Art World Experience didn't want to let the radical openness fully play out, and they were wrong. We were lucky that we had non-art people to prove us wrong. And you should always collaborate with non-art people when you can. They're free of art world anxieties. In the first year, there was a Tumblr blog called ArtPrize Worst. This wasn't us, this was someone who created this. And they would go around to the far corners of ArtPrize and photographing the most cringe-worthy entries they could find and posting them with these jokey captions. And it was a real hit on Grand Rapids social media, and the biggest fans were probably in our office as well. We've done a lot of things wrong over time. It's big and messy and disruptive. We had to act first and get kind of buy-in later, and that was really hard for us. And this idea of making something official so that people can push against it is something that's really important to us. If people are doing their own thing during ArtPrize because they reject it, that is a success for us. That is a successful thing for it to happen during ArtPrize. I just wanted to put this out here. This is Andy Warhol's Marylands, and this was a series that are quite iconic and quite famous. You might have seen them before. When someone asked Andy Warhol why some of the Marylands in that particular set were overexposed and darker than the others, he said, "I guess I'm not very good at screen printing." And that was his response. And art professors to this day who teach this anecdote refuse to take it at face value. They usually insist that he was lying to hide his technical mastery. And why not take him seriously? There are plenty of radical and disruptive ideas already floating around. The rare thing is to take them seriously. And it's a good way of seeing how unpredictable and scary democracy can be. The vote itself, the voice of the people, is never enough for a healthy democracy. Other institutions like press and education and the judiciary and religion must also function along with it. And then sometimes disappointment is the outcome when experimenting with unpredictability. If art is going to help, we need to create a space for art where weak and strong, universal and empirical, expert and novice, delight and disappointment, and left and right can authentically intermingle and challenge one another. ArtPrize is trying to do that.
I know we are running really tight, but we'll take that. We'll take two questions. I see Al and Leslie. Al, I'll start with you.
Could you tell us about the relationship with the winner, and are you still taking possession of the leading?
Yeah. Yeah, we stopped doing that about 3 years ago, not long after I came on board. It's very problematic because you become a collecting institution, and when you become a collecting institution, it radically changes the way you approach things. There's a lot of logistical problems with owning things. If we owned Anila Kayam Aga's intersections, that enormous metal 9-foot by 9-foot box with an enormous light bulb in it, I don't know where we would put it. And I don't know how we would, So what we do now is with the winners, we do our very, very best to present them the following year, usually at the ArtPrize Hub, which we've done every year for the last few years.
Very good. And then Leslie.
Hi, Christian. I'm with the MY Hotel Corporation.
Yes.
Huge fan of ArtPrize.
Thank you.
Just curious if you're still talking about franchising ArtPrize and how that would impact us academically.
Sure. So from the very, very beginning of ArtPrize, literally from almost the first day, we would get inquiries from cities asking what it would take to bring an ArtPrize to their city. And all we've ever really tried to do is try to answer that question as faithfully as we ever possibly could. Rick, it began as an experiment, and Rick is up for success and he's up for failure. The curiosity around the experiment is what really gets him excited. The sort of unanswered question is, could ArtPrize just happen in Grand Rapids, or do the elements of ArtPrize itself, could they replicate, could they translate into another environment? And that is something that's curious to us. We haven't found a suitable city, and nor are we actively franchising, or do we have like a franchising operation or anything. Usually what happens is, my analogy is that it's always like, it's like when a kid asks you or says that they really want a puppy, and then you explain to them all the complications and responsibilities of taking care of a dog, and then they start to get really sort of, this is what we do when cities come to us and say that they really want the puppy. We explain to them the responsibilities of the puppy, and then they're usually kind of nonplussed. So our approach is sort of like a turn-off approach. People come to us, we explain it, and then they're like, thanks a lot.
Great job. So I know there are a number of questions. Christian is going to be around for a little bit, and of course he's totally accessible. So if you want to have coffee with him, and or besides which, I have a very
My
strong
email address right here, christian@artprize.org. You can contact me at any time.
I have a very strong suspicion that Christian is also going to be with us on a regular basis as a member, and in anticipation. I think we can hang out together, don't you?
I think so.
All right. So here's an application. Here's your application. You heard me talk about getting things to the members. So this is not just for you. Remember, I encouraged the members to get to Dawn this afternoon. Well, you can do the same thing.
All right. That's good to know.
Well, then, thank you for a great job.
Thank
You can tell you're really passionate, Christian. So in keeping with tradition, what we do is recognize a speaker like yourself with a certificate that is in honor of the work we do, and importantly, of providing a clean water filter to a family in Nicaragua. And so one is going to be presented, and this certificate is in honor of you.
Oh, that's so great. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Thank
Great.
you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.